But like, what is the weirdest thing people would call? Because I would never call you Mr. Stone Cold. I would say Mr. Austin or Steve.
God dang, Mike Tyson used to always call me Cold Stone.
like the creamery.
Motherfucker, that's the ice cream shop. My name is Stone Cold Steve Austin.
One of the greatest, if not the greatest, wrestlers of all time, Stone Cold Steve Austin, invited us out to his home. It was awesome. Stone Cold was inducted into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2016. Movie star. Now he does off-road racing professionally because why not? It's Stone Cold Steve Austin. Here we go.
People talk about choreographing and setting up matches. I'll never forget the first time I worked with, the King, Jerry Lawler, who's one of my all-time favorites and one of the best. And I was pacing around the ring with him, and I had 2 weeks in the business. And Jerry was saying, all right, tackle, drop down, hip toss. And I said, huh?
Like a ventriloquist, he was saying it.
Yeah, tackle, drop down, hip toss. And there's about, 1,000 people out there. And I go, what? And this is before I invented the what. And he goes, tackle, drop down, hip toss. I said, what? God damn, he called it one more time. And then I said, well, I did a tackle, drop down, and I didn't know who was supposed to hip toss who, and it was a cluster that ensued from there. And Jerry Lawler was booking the territory at the time, and I'm sure he was thinking to himself, why in the did I book this match with this punk kid? Anyway, yeah, that's how it's done.
I remember WCW, you were still Stunning Steve, and when I was really young, I loved Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Awesome.
I hear he was a really great guy too. Never met him. Who were those guys when you came up and the first time you got to actually professionally be a peer that you were like, this is freaking awesome? Yeah.
Well, Ric Flair, because people kind of saw me as maybe being the next Ric Flair, because I was modeling, this before I had my neck injury down in WCW, I was kind of modeling my style after Ric, because to me he had the ultimate pro wrestling style. And I'll never forget, we were at a TV taping down there in South Carolina or somewhere like that, and it was me, Rick, and somebody against 3 other guys, and I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna show this motherfucker what's up. And all of a sudden, Rick tags in, and I see him go to work. And of course, I'm a lifelong fan. And when you're standing on the apron and you're watching a guy, and that was an 18 by 18 ring in WCW, but all of a sudden, when you're watching the man do his thing, you're like, this. I got a long way to go, but it was awesome to be in the ring with him because it was like as a heads up call, like, okay, man, this is kind of, you need to step up your game a whole lot more than you thought you did. And I would never say that I ever reached Ric Flair status in the ring at all because I consider him the GOAT. But working with a guy like that, even working with Ravishing Rick Rude, but working with any of those guys that had any names was always fun to me. But also, yeah, I really didn't look at it like that way after a few years in the business, or even after a few months in the business. You're just thinking, okay, man, these guys are just like me. They might be more well known, but it's not a big deal.
Was there a specific time in your career or your life when you realized, like, oh wow, I'm getting famous, like this is it, it's happening?
I started in Dallas, and then I went to Tennessee, and then I went to, I was living in Nashville, and then I got hired by Dusty Rhodes to work for World Championship Wrestling in Atlanta. Ravishing Rick Rude had just come into Atlanta, and we hooked up almost immediately and became very good friends, so I would travel with Ravishing Rick Rude. Rude had just come off his run with in WWF, and everybody who watched wrestling knew who that guy was.
I dance like him. I would watch him and I would dance like him, yeah.
But when I started noticing that people were starting to finally gravitate towards me, when I started off in Dallas, just a punk, I went to USWA where Dutch Mantell gave me the Stunning Steve Austin name. He gave me the Steve Austin name. And I was starting to gain traction. And then when I went to WCW, as Stunning Steve, that was okay. But when I went to WWF and I became Stone Cold, and we were in Chicago, and man, it was a tag match, and I can't even remember who I was tagging with or against. But for some reason, Chicago's always been a stronghold for me. And every time I got in that damn ring, and people would come alive. And that was when I really got a sense of, hey man, I'm gaining traction. people know who and what I am, and they're starting to get with me. So that's when on an internal sense, as far as the business, I never really, after not getting recognized by people traveling with Rick Rude, didn't pay any attention to that.
Any of my friends that are extremely athletic, especially when they were in high school, they played every position. Like, I would assume, because you have been an athlete your whole life, do they had you running the ball, catching the ball? Is that true? Like, especially in high school, did you play running back, I bet, or quarterback?
Yeah, I was running back, and I wasn't fast enough to run east or west, so I ran north
Straight
and
up,
south.
yeah.
And man, I'm lucky that I grew up 100 miles south of Houston, Texas, because if I'd have grown up in Houston, I'd have been sitting on the bench or playing a lot more linebacker. But being down there in South Texas, you can run a 4.9 40, and if you can run over people, you'll get the job done. So I was, all district. Enough, good enough of a football player to get a junior college scholarship, and good enough after that to go to the next level to get another scholarship. And then I dropped out of college after my last year of eligibility ran out, and I stopped college at 17 years. It was 17 hours to graduate, and God dang it, broke my mom and dad's heart. But athletics helped pave the way for me to, get into college and get an education or whatever I got of one, and then get me into the wrestling business.
Do you ever drink wine?
Oh yeah, I love wine.
Or people were like, why are you drinking wine? You're Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you should only drink beer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a well-rounded drinker.
I think I would just be like,
Good answer.
Chardonnay, are you sure, Mr. Austin?
Goddamn, I've been around for so long now. I'll make a post on Instagram. Say, oh man, you better watch your liver. You've been drinking. Like, motherfucker, I take care of myself. I ran hard when I was in the wrestling game. I ran hard and I ran fast. That's just the way I lived. I won't speak about anybody else. But, yeah, I love wine. I love my beer. I've been in the beer business with El Segundo Brewing Company since 2015, and I love a good bourbon. Wine is good, man. Wine is good after a race when you've had a couple of beers, and it's that final drink before you hit the hay.
You were in a few movies with Adam Sandler. What was he like?
I always tell people that's the nicest guy I ever met in Hollywood, and I didn't do Hollywood. I lived in Marina Del Rey in the Venice area. So I didn't go to parties, I didn't go to the Hollywood Hills, I didn't do none of that shit. It wasn't my scene. I was an athlete. We were talking early before we started rolling cameras, and we started talking about the artistry of some of the guys that you've interviewed. But man, those actors are a little different, and I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean they're different than an athlete. They're wired different, or I'm wired differently than they are. Adam Sandler was the funniest, nicest guy I've ever worked with, and I've enjoyed each time I've gotten to work with him. He's a super guy, a sweetheart.
Are you feeling fulfilled in your competitive spirit by racing now from what you were getting from football and then professional wrestling?
I found racing side-by-sides, and I've been doing it for about a year and a half, and I've absolutely fallen in love with it. And it's just so different from anything I've ever done, because I've been driving, 4x4, four-wheel drive stuff, four-wheelers down when I lived in Georgia in the mud, hunting and side-by-sides, but just recreationally. And when you start racing something and pushing the machine to its limits and pushing yourself to your limits, which you don't know that you have yet because you've never driven at 100%, it takes a while to learn how to do that. So I equate it with when I first started wrestling, I sucked. And when I first started driving these things, I won't say I sucked, but I had a lot to learn. And the biggest mistake you make in pro wrestling is trying to do everything too fast. In racing, they'll tell you, and it didn't make sense to me until I ran a few races, in order to drive fast, you must first learn to drive slow. And I couldn't believe it took me this long to find, the sport that I found. At 58 last year, I was a Rookie of the Year in the Federation. So I was a Rookie of the Year when I started my wrestling career in 1990. So I think I was the oldest rookie to ever win that award. And I'm competing against, there's people out my age, but there's also people that are half my age. One of my arch rivals last year was a 14-year-old girl. She can drive her ass off. So, when you're born out there and you get that DNA in you, man, them kids are fast. So it's fun, it's competitive, it gives me something to do.
Thank you for being so generous with your time. We're massive fans.